Shattering read Chapter 11, E Tipser. Author side note. In the book, it is respite spelled backwards. Luck appeared to be prepping to do a magic trick again. They had found a nice, shaded grove right on the cusp of the desert and parked in the early evening. The birds were gulping down water by a nearby stream, and Luck set a cube on the ground. I have been working on something for a few years. The marketing idea was easy homes that could easily be stowed for those with nothing. Not that any homeless person could afford one, but I had hoped to start distributing smaller versions to get some people started. I think people will really miss out on this idea at home. He frowned as he stepped away from the contraption after pushing a button. Stand back. This time, spider-like legs reached for the sky, then spread out with taut webbing to form a 20 by 20 vaulted tent with shaded windows and a zip-up door. He undid the flap to reveal a whole house already set up for living. There was an inflatable couch that was already firm, along with electrical amenities like a large screen TV and stove. "Have you ever been camping before?" Faust asked, with an eyebrow raised almost off his face. "I have," Luck smirked back. "I just found it awful and prefer it this way. After last time, I told myself, never again. But then I became a little paranoid that I would have to." "Anxiety really does pay off sometimes," he replied as he turned the television screen on. You could see the vein of annoyance pulsating on Faust's forehead. The audacity of comfort where there was supposed to be none was not something he seemed to tolerate well for some reason. "Who wants to play a game?" Luck offered a remote, and Faust grumped. "What if we can't hear someone approaching?" Faust noted. "I sincerely doubt we will have to worry about anyone out this far," Luck supplied. Faust harumphed. "We can always leave the sound on low and keep it down." Luck shook the controller like a treat to a dog in hopes of raising the mood. "Sound stays off," Faust stated. "I'm going to go check on the birds." He undid the zipped clasp and went to find the animals. "It feels like I stepped in something hot and smelly and tracked it through the house," Luck observed to Vita. "Don't worry about it." She waved a dismissive hand. "Faust has never been a huge video game lover. The outside is also like a sanctuary for him. I think what you're doing bastardized his whole vision of the experience. Plus, his paranoia comes built in, which, naturally, leaves him on edge, and he does constantly worry about something disastrous happening," Vina answered. She plopped on the inflatable couch. It was so much better than a rock or blanket. Luck slapped down next to her, causing the seat to bounce her up for a moment. They snickered like children. Their eyes locked. A new, unknown, curious energy grew between them. Vita was trying to process where that feeling came from. The freedom of being away in the middle of nowhere and away from their problems, and the adult left the building. It made her feel like she was sneaking around as a teenager again. Luck scooched closer and traced a finger in circles on her knee. Goosebumps encompassed her whole body. Luck watched with fascination as they played up her arm. Faust started to pull at the zipper, and they moved a bit apart. He looked at them and the lack of movement on the TV. He had a load of food over his shoulder, and a look on his face that said he could see what was going on, and very much didn't care, but also didn't think it was a good idea. He set the food in the kitchen area and went right back outside. "Would you want to come play a game?" Luck asked. He had picked up a controller and flipped through options, filing across the screen. "Oh, what kind of game are we playing?" she asked, picking up the other controller, which was in its own little cubby. "That depends." He raised his eyebrows, looked towards the screen, and then back at her. "What kind of games do you like to play?" A lithe note of seduction fell on his voice. "I don't play games often," she offered. "When I do, they are typically short-lived and at a local bar." That was true of her video game expertise and her fleeting moments of romance. Her traumatic childhood had made most relationships difficult at best, and she felt she needed to add, "And with my dad right around the corner, it doesn't sound super enticing at the moment." She allowed that thought to air out between them. Related to or no, the man raised me. He used his remote and whizzed through the different screens, looking for the perfect selection. He stopped on a title called Wrecked Racing that depicted old clunkers reimagined, racing down a dark terraced modern street in interim. One had found its way off the road and was exploding dramatically. This one is pretty simple and straightforward. There's a section where you can build your car if you would like, but we can skip that and just get to racing. He smiled. If you win, maybe I'll even do a little dance for you. I saw the way you danced this morning. I don't know if I need a repeat show so soon. She laughed, still trying to let him down gently. But you didn't even see my best moves. Didn't you play games professionally? I've never played on this system before, and I've only ever been Metacore at best. My chances of beating you here are slim to none. I have poor hand-eye coordination. She reverted tactics, hoping things would take a more innocent turn. Okay then. If I win, Luck continued, tapping his chin. No, I don't like these terms. Vita crossed her arms playfully. What kind of terms do you like? Where did you assume I was going with that statement? Luck asked, waggling an eyebrow in a way that made her chuckle. He was cute. Mentally, she was willing to give him that. I thought you said you would be quiet, Faust yelled from outside. They laughed harder. Vita met those copper-veined eyes and spoke plainly. Currently, I want no terms or conditions, but that is not to say that if a friend were to get in close for a good cuddle at the end of the night, because sometimes human closeness is more endearing than words, I would not pass it up. The candor floated gently and quietly from her beautifully full bowed lips, through his ebony ears to his thick cranium, where it vibrated, leaving him to sit up in a more managerial manner. Things have seemed surreal over the past week and a half. I read something that apparently had meaning that I wasn't supposed to know. I'm getting chased by a powerful person who wants me dead because of a bumble, and I'm not confident in whatever conclusion may come with this whole thing. However you would classify it, is going to be a good one. I don't know how close you or anyone should get at the moment. Vita cast her hopeful eyes away from him to focus on the screen. That is exactly why you should enjoy this time. There is nothing that would loosen you up more than a bit of playtime. The world is always an unknown. What have you got to lose? Fun is fun. You can only enjoy certain experiences when you're alive. He sighed and clamped his hands together in his lap. I apologize for being so forward. No one has really put me on the back burner in a very long time. But that should not overpower the fact that you have your whole world turned around in an incomprehensible way, and that you're doing your best to work through it. I should respect that. He, too, turned his attention to the game and picked the track to race on. Thank you. Vita reached and grabbed his hand for a brief moment. Faust whistled an alert from the tent flap. His head was poking through, and he was loud enough to break their discussion and gain their attention. His eyebrows had fallen over his eyes in a manner that bemoaned danger. Grab the needs. Let's leave. Faust attempted to whisper, but it came out more as a garbled bark. Now! He put a finger to his lips, grabbed his bags, and left again. Vita followed his motions, and Luck followed them out. He pushed a button, and the tent and all its goodies rolled up into a pack small enough to clip on the side of his mechanized beast. They all got on their birds, but Faust's and Vita's would not move. They were so clumsy in the dark of night that they would not budge. Luck was mounted and ready to follow orders, but the live birds were resistant to every silent order. Vita hopped off and pushed Fletcher, who let out a loud, irritated honk. Vita stepped back hurriedly. Leave the birds, Luck urged quietly. Hop on. He patted the metal horse. Its back end morphed into 2 more seats. Petunia can handle the weight. At that moment, something small, with a blinking red light, flashed by Luck's head. Faust pointed at the same time. Luck's jacket sprang into action. A mostly transparent bubble covered him and his mount. A small explosion went off right next to Luck's head. He was startled while the 2 on the ground flinched. Now! He held out his hand and the 2 scrambled up. Vita was first. Faust handed up his bag. Then, boom! Vita had made it onto the mount, which had coated her in its protective shield. But Faust was not so lucky. No. Vita's ears were filled with a muffled ringing, and her eyes did not trust the situation. No! The horse was thudding away, swiftly and silently, from Faust's decapitated torso. The world stretched and thinned in Vita's shock as the party of two darted away from the gory scene into the seemingly peaceful night. Time passed. Vita was unsure exactly how long. They were still moving. Petunia's footfalls were so soft they barely made an audible sound, and the ride was so smooth that it didn't feel as though they moved at all. A sweet smell attacked her nose, bringing her out of her shock. Reality finally hit her, and it felt like a small mallet had whacked her head. She threw up. "Are you okay?" Luck asked. The concern in his voice matched the look on his face as he turned to examine her. He stuffed a hand into one of his jacket pockets, pulled out a handkerchief, and handed it to her. She dabbed the side of her mouth and tried to speak. It felt like there was at least 3 large rocks shoved down her throat, and broken glass filled the remaining space. "I don't exactly know what I am at the moment," she gurgled past the burning sensation. A few minutes of silence passed before she tried to clear her throat, failed, and managed to add, "How long have we been running?" "Roughly 3 hours," Luck responded. "The whole time you have just been staring at nothing. On occasion you would say no. Sometimes you laughed, and other times cried." He pulled on the reins and stopped the horse. "I don't think Faust thought that Talbot would go so far." He turned around and faced her. It was hard to make out much from under the cover of the trees in the star-strewn night, but she felt his hand on her shoulder. The touch did not offer any release from the trauma, but something about his loose grip tethered her back to earth. She was no longer adrift in the darkness, lit only by nature's chemicals, burning eons away. Now there was a wispy bit of hope, pulling her along like a helium-filled balloon. "I'm really sorry," he added lamely. "I just don't understand." It felt as though her senses weren't working properly. She returned to quietude as the world went by in a blur. Luck found what he considered a safe place for them to rest. He got them situated while Vita sat. She pulled one of the new Earth benediction robes out of her bag, laid it on the ground, then slopped over into it. Her face pressed so hard into the fabric she could smell the soil beneath it, and she sobbed. Thanks so much for listening to Shattering Red. This is the end of Chapter 11. If you have liked what you've heard so far, please be sure to like and subscribe. I will include a link to the book below and a link to my Kofi as well. Thanks so much. Take care.